Okay, I want to get into a topic that's kind of been on my mind. I just went to Memphis and I heard a lot of different guitar players, and uh, you can always tell the ones in blues. This was a blues competition, the IBC, which is the International Blues Challenge, that's in Memphis, usually end of January, early February. And um, there's like over 200 blues bands and as many solo duo acts that are competing with each other in different venues throughout the week. And I heard a lot of guitar players, and I didn't hear everybody because you can't be in three places at once. But I remember going into one club and I heard the guitar player, you could tell he definitely studied his Stevie Ray Vaughan. And and then the next band, also very much influenced by Stevie Ray Vaughan. And when you think of Stevie Ray, I love Stevie Ray Vaughan. I mean, he was such a heartfelt, um, passionate blues player, and and it's so sad that he's gone, that he left us so soon. But I remember playing in clubs in the 90s, like I first heard Stevie Ray Vaughan like probably mid late 80s, whenever his first album came out. I can't remember what year. And I was like blown away by this guy. I just, gosh, where did he come from? And I know he really made an impact on a lot of players. And I decided then, I said I could copy this guy, and learn his licks. And I did learn some of them because I teach them. I teach Pride and Joy, and I've taught his version of Mary Had a Little Lamb, which was from a Buddy Guy version or song. And but some of his stuff was really faster than I can play, and I didn't really. I thought about myself trying to imitate him, and then I said, wait a minute, this is such a strong personality in his guitar playing that it would be pretty obvious if I imitated this style. And so I'm not going to do it. I decided not to. And at that point, I had studied several rock guitarists, and blues, like Albert King was my favorite. And Albert King was one of Stevie's favorites. If you listen to Texas Flood, it's brilliant. But he's doing a lot of Albert King licks, and most of you probably know that. And he really loved Albert King, and he could play Albert King, imitate Albert King better than anybody I'd heard. And but probably a lot of young people thought that those were his licks, even though they were Albert King stylings. And that's okay. In blues, we no man is an island, and but what after that first album and the first couple of albums, and then In Step, I saw him twice. I saw him first in Cincinnati, and it was before he quit drinking, I'm pretty sure, because I didn't think he was playing that well. I didn't think he was playing really very hot, and he was kind of like phoning it in, as we say, and he had gotten the organ player, and the organ player was filling in a lot, so he didn't really have to fill in as much as when he was a three-piece. So I did, but he played good, and he had like an Indian headdress on at one point when he came out on stage, and the Fabulous Thunderbirds with Jimmy Vaughan, his older brother, played before him, and then later on, Jimmy and Stevie played four hands on one guitar, and they were doing, songs like Walk Don't Run and Wipe Out and stuff like that, and it was really good to see them both playing one guitar, and it was really special that night. And then I saw him after he had cleaned up, and he had to. I mean, it was going to kill him. You know, the drugs, all the cocaine and the alcohol. Um, and after he'd done the Instep album, I saw him in Louisville, and at Louisville Gardens, and he was playing his butt off. He was playing so much better than that first time I'd seen him, and just playing really fast. And you could tell he was focused, and the whole band was just kind of looking into the audience, not really jumping around or smiling much, but you could tell they were, you know, they were doing it really focused, but not in an entertaining way. They weren't jumping around like a lot of rock bands. But and Lonnie Mack opened up for him in Louisville, and then later Stevie and Lonnie Mack played together. I think they were both playing acoustic guitars, and they did his Oreo Cookie Blues. That's Lonnie Mack's song, and that was special too because they were good friends. And the thing I want to make a point of is that all through the '90s, I used to play the Slippery Noodle Blues Club in Indianapolis, and there were always two bands. There were two rooms: a small room, which was the original club, and then a big room, showcase room. And I remember, you know, like I was doing pretty straight ahead blues, you know, not really doing any Stevie Ray Vaughan songs. If somebody requested one and really wanted to hear one, I would pull out Pride and Joy, which I kind of did my own way, but that was about the only song that I ever performed of Stevie Ray Vaughan. But the other band, I would go listen to the other band that was playing in the other room, whether it was the big room or the small room, and almost without fail, the guitar players in those other bands were Stevie Ray Vaughan imitators, just all through the '90s. And so, starting with the late '80s up to even today, because a couple of weeks ago I was in Memphis, and I mentioned there was a Stevie Ray Vaughan sounding band, followed by another Stevie Ray Vaughan sounding band, you know, and there's Stevie is a good person to imitate, but the problem, there's a couple of problems with that, you know. Myself personally, I get really tired of hearing people imitating him, and I love Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I love hearing Stevie playing Stevie, you know. And he imitated, you know, Jimi Hendrix, and you know, he did, you know, like Little Wing and Voodoo Child, and he imitated Albert King, like on Texas Flood, and I'm sure other songs. And but Stevie was a encyclopedia of, and he imitated Lonnie Mack. He could play almost every Lonnie Mack instrumental, and also every Freddie King instrumental. So he was not just copying one person, you know. And that's the thing that's not good, is when a guitar player copies, or any kind of improvisational artist copies one person to where it's obvious that you're so influenced and passionately influenced by, say, Stevie Ray Vaughan, that everybody knows it because they can hear you're doing that styling, you know. And I would say it's kind of a shallow way to, especially if you're really serious about playing blues or playing blues rock or just rock guitar, to imitate one person. Like if somebody imitated Van Halen and just did everything that sounded like Van Halen, you're not going to go very far, because it's obvious that you've imprinted on that one artist. And it's like Howard Roberts, the great jazz guitarist. He said, if you imitate one person, it's plagiarism. But if you copy two or more, it's research. And that's a good way to look at it. Learn. And Stevie knew about everybody, just in the same way Jimi Hendrix, when he went to England, he was telling people about Robert Lockwood, the chess studio player, and Robert Lockwood was always sort of in the background, and also the Myers brothers who played with Little Walter, all the bread and butter guitar players, Steve Cropper, and people like that influenced Jimi Hendrix. He loved to talk about them because he adored them all. But he wasn't just influenced by one person. Like it would be, like if Jimi Hendrix sounded exactly like B.B. King, he wouldn't be Jimi Hendrix. And he ended up, innovating on guitar. And I think in a lot of ways, Stevie Ray Vaughan was an innovator in that he copied other players, but he took it to a different level. And his original music, I prefer more than him doing Voodoo Child, or even though he did his own, he made it his own. But like when the first album came out, Scuttle Button, or no, it was Rude Mood. Rude Mood was on the first album. Scuttle Button was on, I think, the second album, or maybe the third. I can't remember. But those two instrumentals I thought were very original for him and really hard to play. So I didn't even try to imitate those things, but to pull it off the way he did. And he had a way of playing rhythm and riffs at the same time, like chords and riffs. Like in I haven't played this in a while, but speed that up about 5 times. Sorry. So it sounds like he's accompanying himself with chords and playing a riff, a bass riff at the same time. It isn't easy to do. If I practiced it more, I didn't practice it, but that's from Pride and Joy, and that I thought was a really good original song from Stevie. And I just wanted to mention that, it's not, or talk about, it's not good to copy Jimi Hendrix, and just do everything Jimi Hendrix did. And Hendrix is hard to copy, though. If you ever try to do every lick in Voodoo Child, Slight Return, you find that he doesn't repeat himself. It sounds kind of like he is, but he doesn't. And I wrote it all out once, and it was like, I think 7 or 8 pages, because it wasn't like you could put a repeat sign on something. He kept changing through the whole song, and that's a good thing to notice about what a real blues artist on guitar is, and that is he might have a style like Albert King. He does a lot of those kind of licks, but if you actually learn an Albert King song and copy every lick, you'll find that he doesn't really repeat himself either, even though it sounds like he does. It sounds like he's kind of doing the same licks a lot, but he's not. And he's doing them differently. And to me, that's a true blues artist, where it almost sounds like they're, they've just got a few licks that they keep repeating, but like Elmore James, like that. And but if you like, one time I tried to learn the solo to It Hurts Me Too, or maybe it was The Sky Is Crying by Elmore James, where he's doing all at the 12th fret with a slide, but he doesn't repeat himself, and it's really hard to imitate it exactly the way he does it because it's so subtle. And that's a real blues artist to me, is somebody that if you're walking down the street and you just hear guitar coming out of a club and you know it's Elmore James, or you know it's Albert King, or you know it's Magic Sam or Otis Rush, and because their styles are their own, and that's what I would suggest for all of you who are more advanced. And it's really good to imitate and learn a solo note for note, to learn about phrasing and learn how another guitar player thinks. And that's all good when you're learning. But then eventually you want to let go of that. Like I've got a lot of solos, like, Chuck Berry. That's an easy one, but Johnny Be Good, but I can play it note for note, and it's burned into my brain. But when I'm on stage, I don't pull out that lick or any of those licks, hardly. I might kind of do it, if I'm doing a Chuck Berry song, I might kind of. But even Chuck Berry said that his style was based on T-Bone Walker, who did a lot of that, with a little more bluesy style than Chuck Berry did. But and also he was really into big band music, like Glenn Miller, In the Mood, like, and he would play with rhythms like that, do rhythmic tricks, where you play 3 notes against 4 counts, and that's a common thing in lead guitar, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and that you're doing repeated 3 notes, but in a 4-note count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Jimmy Page did that. Maybe a little too much, during Led Zeppelin's career, but there was many facets to Jimmy Page. But so imitating is good up to a certain point, and that's the way we can learn. But then you want to focus on things that make your style. I do certain things, like I do a lot of grace notes if I'm playing, say, blues in C. And I do little half-step bends that I don't hear a lot of guitar players doing. And some of that, like that kind of thing. I remember hearing a New Orleans harmonica player, and at the end of his phrase, he goes, he did, and I just heard it on a educational TV special on New Orleans music, and it was when I was young, and it stuck with me. It was kind of haunting, the way he did that. And I, just from my memory, I tried to kind of recreate it and ended up doing it my own way, And that's another thing, that is really a good idea, is to try to imitate other instruments on the guitar. Don't just get hung up on guitar players. I mean, it's good to know a lot of Freddie King licks and a lot of Chuck Berry licks and Albert King licks and Otis Rush and all that. But after a while, you end up sounding like every other guitar player, because other guitar players are doing Otis Rush licks, and they're doing Magic Sam licks. And why not imitate saxophone players? Because then you have to go out of the box, and you like learn a sax solo, note for note, like Louis Jordan's solo. Learn a Little Walter harmonica solo. But, I mean, you're not going to sound like a harmonica, but try to imitate his notes and his bends and his phrasing. And it really could open up a whole new world. Imitate piano players like Professor Longhair, in New Orleans, like get into like a New Orleans groove, and with Professor Long here, he does a lot of triplets like dee da 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 da, you know, that kind of thing in his piano playing, and try to hear stylistically what he's doing, and you're not going to sound like a piano, you know, but that's a really good thing to do. It really just opens up, and stop listening to guitar players all the time. You know, after a while, you're really limiting yourself. If you're into blues, listen to vocalists like Junior Parker. You know, listen to gospel like gospel singers, and I think that's what on slide guitar what Derek Trucks has done. He's imitated some gospel vocalists, you know, like Mavis Staples, people like that. And then he also has done kind of imitated sarod or sitar phrasings on with the slide guitar, which is really unique. He's a person that sounds like nobody but himself. I don't, you know, like when I first heard Derek Trucks, it was like maybe a couple of decades ago, and he played at a local club in Lexington, and he was played 2 nights in a row. And one of my students said, "Do you want a ticket? I've got an extra ticket." And well, you know, he's probably just going to do Dwayne Allman licks on the slide, and he's a kid wonder and all that, you know. And I got to the club, and I said, well, I'll go, you know. I've never heard him. And I got to the club, and it was the first time in a long time that I found myself inching my way up to the stage just to see what he was doing with his hands. And I thought his style was very much his own, and you could hear influences, but like sitar and you know, phrasing like Indian music, and as well as gospel. You know, like when he really got intense, I heard gospel singers. You know, so that's about all I have to say on the subject. But those are the kind of things like listening to other instruments, and just don't limit yourself to guitar, because that's kind of, you know, it'll wear you out, and you'll end up sounding like everybody else. You know, you don't want to do that. Find what is unique about the way you play, and it might be mistakes that you make that you can focus on that really become your style. You know, maybe things that you do differently, maybe by accident. Every now and then when you're improvising, if you do a lick, hey, wait a minute, you know, record yourself so that you can review the recording and learn your own licks. You know, that's a good thing to do too. You don't want to imitate yourself too much either, though. But I mean, you want to grow as an artist and get to where you can make new licks. You know, and once you get into letting go of imitating Eric Clapton and B.B. King and Guitar Slim, get beyond that, because so many guitar players who are virtuoso players, they can imitate all those styles. They can pull up Muddy Waters, they can pull up Buddy Guy, and play almost exactly like them. But I don't think that's a real virtue in the long run. It's kind of impressive if, the way some young players do that, but you really want to focus on what the character of your own personality coming through your instrument, and that's all I have to say. Okay, so if you like this, and if you have something to say, this is a good discussion. This is like a little vlog that I'm doing. I want to do certain subjects like this, and I just wanted to especially mention Stevie Ray Vaughan, because I see so many Stevie Ray Vaughan imitators, and they don't really know about other blues. They don't know who Charles Brown is or Roscoe Gordon, who are piano players, and you know, because they're guitar players listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan and Stevie Ray Vaughan only, you know. So expand your scope, and that really what helped me was we got a harmonica player, Ben Maygarden, who's still a good friend of mine, lives in New Orleans, and he had a record collection of 78s that like a whole room length, big living room length of 78s, and he had Louis Jordan 78s. He had old, like George Harmonica Smith, people like that, and um, he really opened up my listening. Like started listening to Junior Parker, and a lot of Junior Parker stuff has some guitar, but not a lot. And then Little Willie John, which may every now and then there's some guitar stuff, but it's not really guitar up front. It's the voice of Little Willie John. And at first, some of the, like I thought Junior Parker, he sounds like a white man, that's what I thought. But he's such a crooner, has such a beautiful vibrato that it's like the opposite of like a singer like John Lee Hooker, and you can be a crooner, you can sing blues pretty, as well as rough, and so it opens up your mind and your scope of what you understand as blues, and that's when you become a real blues artist. And same with any other genre of music, jazz or rock or country music. Don't just focus on one person. Like somebody just imitates Bob Dylan, and tries to sound like him when they sing. It's going to be obvious. Okay, so you know, you know, imitate him and then imitate Johnny Cash at the same time, or Elvis. So that's enough. I'm going to stop. So please comment, like, and subscribe. Follow John Hedger Guitar Studio on Instagram and Facebook. And I'll see you in the next one. All right? Okay.